Welcome back to Resident Skeptics for 2022. Me and Jordan, we made it. We made it through the holidays.
We did. We've made it. I've honestly been looking forward to 2022 because of the midterm election. I'm like, if we could just make it through 2021, and if the Democrats just bomb enough, then
I've actually make it to November. I got a hold of a meme. It's kind of a meme. It's basically a 2022 bingo. It has all these like natural disasters and different things that are on it. I've already got 2 down. One of them's a new COVID strain, and I forgot what the other one was. But they're like,
you have to send that to me.
Wildfires, riots, aliens invade, dinosaurs come back.
Dinosaurs.
I do
want dinosaurs
that
to
was
come
actually
back.
That was it. I had an article on like the 3rd of January or something.
I've been getting recommended these articles for like long lost sea creatures, like the fossils that they find.
They're so cool.
It is
terrifying.
Dope. It is so cool. And I'm like, now Google knows what I like, and so it sucks me in. Facebook also knows that I like cute dogs interacting with babies. And so now it recommends those videos for me constantly. And they also know that I like veteran stories. So it's always recommending me veteran stories.
Oh, fun.
And those are actually nice. I'm like, finally, the Facebook algorithm has done something right. Yeah. So they know what I like now. But you'll have to send me that bingo list. And now that I know that you love fossils, I will be sending you all of those articles.
Well, I've found the ones, I like the ones where the creatures are still alive, not just fossils.
I honestly want them to be alive too, but the articles that I've been looking at, I think it's called Live Science, but like they actually sketch out what the animal would look like if it
pretty
were
scary
alive.
Looking.
It's really cool. It's super, super duper cool. And you know that, I think this is a couple months ago where I was like super into like whale documentaries.
Yeah, I remember that.
I'm still into it. I haven't stopped. They're really, I know you call them, you call beluga whales sea cows, if I remember correctly.
I think I did.
Yeah, which, is not too far off, but they're actually incredibly smart creatures.
They are.
Very, very smart. And so these little documentaries are fascinating. All of that to say.
I will ask, did you ever land on a documentary that talks about dolphins?
I'm just not interested in
dolphins.
And
what awful little creatures they are.
I have not watched a documentary on dolphins.
They're horrible.
Okay, I'm going to have to now, just to so we can talk about it later.
Okay.
But we have had a lot to discuss. We had an interesting holiday season. Most
extenuating circumstances. I think we were actually supposed to record last week, but it wasn't going to happen.
Why was it not going to happen, Connor?
Because us and everybody else was sick with COVID.
Yeah, the entire world was sick, but we are survivors. We did make it.
It was a harrowing experience.
It was. Actually, it wasn't, but it was definitely. So for you, yours was like a confirmed case.
Mine was confirmed and tested because it, I guess a little bit of backstory. I grew up getting strep fairly often because there was something wrong with my tonsils. Once those got removed in my early teens, I haven't had it since. But it's not supposed to keep me from being able to get it. So it's been over like 10 years since I've last had it, and I started getting this sore throat. Trying to think. Christmas was what, Friday? It was on a Friday?
Yes.
Christmas was on Friday.
Wait, it was on Saturday.
Was it? So Christmas Eve was Friday then?
Yeah.
Okay, so Tuesday evening that week, my throat started feeling sore, and by the end of Wednesday, going into Thursday, it was hurting pretty bad, and it felt a lot like I remembered strep feeling. That was the only symptom that I had. My doctors weren't able to see me, so I went over to an urgent care to go get tested for strep because I didn't want to go through the entire holiday weekend and come out on Monday with the same sore throat. Because it's a bacterial infection. It's not going away with the antibiotics.
Right.
I get there. I tell them the sore throat is the only thing that I have. And they're like, okay, we're going to test you for COVID. I'm like, okay, how about anything else? And they're like, well, what would you like to be tested for? I don't know, strep.
other things that involve the throat.
It felt weird telling the doctor, test me for this.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
It was kind of odd, but I waited. They said, okay. They got me in. The nurse walks in. She's like, okay, I got the test ready. And I was like, which test? She's like, the COVID test? Is there another test? I'm like, yeah, strep. I asked to be tested for strep. The only symptom I have is sore throat. And I'd like to not assume that it's just COVID.
Right.
I know that it's very popular to get COVID right now, but there's plenty of other things out there that can be causing my sore throat. And that's the only symptom I have. Now, I didn't have fevers, which was the one conflicting thing. Normally, I believe you get fevers along with strep. It doesn't feel great. And then they tested me for both of them, and strep came back negative and COVID came back positive. Talked to the doctor, and this is probably the part that surprised me the most for me. Is one, he did give me some treatment options, which was doubling up on a bunch of different vitamins, C, D, and zinc were the primary ones. Mm-hmm. But he told me of which urgent clinics in Charlotte were going to be treating basically for COVID. He's like, if you want to get treated for it, they have antibody treatments. And for anybody in the Charlotte area of North Carolina, StarMed is the main one in the city that actually has it. And there's only a handful of them in the entire city. And I think that a few of there's another hospital here. I'm forgetting the name of it, but they might have a few. But basically, there's less than a dozen places that I found in this city that are treating COVID.
Right, not just vaccines.
Tests and vaccines are a dime a dozen. They're on like every other corner. There's like as many of them as there are.
We literally
drug
went
dealers.
to Godova, and I think we were actually parking in a rapid test lot. We didn't.
It was
mean
on the
to.
edge.
We didn't mean to. We weren't sure if the sign wasn't super clear. But then we ended up moving to a different spot. But we were like right next to people getting their rapid tests, and so you can find those just about everywhere. But in regards to treatment, there's, as you're kind of talking, it's not quite as accessible. Nope. It's more few and far between in compared to testing places.
Yeah, it was actually pretty aggravating because hands off to StarMed for doing those treatments, and they're doing them for free, by the way. So they're antibody treatments. They're derived from somebody's, I guess, white blood cells or immune system that has already encountered the virus. So that's what they're using to boost. It's basically an immune system boost. And they might have been giving other things out as well. I never found out because it was a 2-hour wait. 2-hour wait. Then you get the antibodies, and then you have a 1-hour observation period. And I didn't have that many hours in the day. And by the time I was able to get on their schedule, it was the following week. My sore throat, so let's see, I think I said, Tuesday night, I started to get sore throat. The antibiotics they gave me were mostly for an anti-inflammatory to help with the sore throat, but then they also had some properties to assist if there were any strep-like properties to the virus that I had. By Friday afternoon, so Christmas Eve, sore throat really just started to go away. In its place, a cough.
Oh, great. Lesser of two evils, maybe? Perhaps? Which one's worse?
Yeah, it was probably the worst for like the 6 to 12 hours that I had them at the same time, because it was a sore throat with a cough, couldn't control it. Yeah. And the cough was not the worst one I've had, by the way. It was just, it didn't help that there was a sore throat, and it just kind of wrecked every time I had to cough. But sore throat went away by Friday evening. Christmas Day feeling better outside of the cough. And then I think it was around Sunday or Monday when the cough started to go away for the most part, like the majority of the cough. I still have a little bit, so excuse me on this podcast if for some reason I involuntarily cough. Like 2 days later, all of a sudden I started losing smell and taste. Really quickly. It was like breakfast. I was like, I can't really taste this. And then by the afternoon, I was like, I can't taste this at all. It's gone.
Yeah. I hate that for you.
Yeah, so far it's come back for me for the most part. I can really distinguish between, I think my wife called them the genres of flavors: salty, sweet, bitter,
so you
sour.
can get like the main stuff.
Yeah, I can tell
like...
that there's certain things I can smell: clove, cinnamon, nutmeg. Those I can smell. I can taste peanut butter pretty strongly. Apple juice, I can, like, there's certain flavors.
Vodka.
Not really, actually.
That's pretty strong. I'm actually a little surprised.
Tried vodka, tequila, gin, whiskey. Tried little bits of all of them, and for the most part, they all taste the same.
Oh
And I described it as fire water. I was like, if you leave it in your mouth long enough, you can tell your tongue starts going numb, and you can feel the effects of it.
That's not good.
You can still feel the burning effect when you swallow the liquor, but overall the flavor is just not there. And I like the flavor of whiskey quite a bit, and gin. And I can't taste it, but it's kind of coming back now.
That's good. That's good. I think that you hit on an interesting point where talking about like, I feel like a lot of doctors, at least from what I can tell, again, I don't know if this is data driven or not, what I'm going to say, because I haven't looked at the data for it, but I feel like sometimes a lot of doctors are obsessed with COVID. Like, it's got to be COVID. I've kind of hinted, when I had mono in 2020, they're like, the only thing that could possibly exist is COVID, and you're just like,
I remember that they kept trying to make it COVID for you, and it's like you were negative on every test.
Yeah, like my main doctor at the time, like, loved him, thought he was great, but like that's when I told him all my symptoms and it came back negative. They're like, okay, well, just exercise, eat well, and I'm like, you fool, I already do that. Like, what do you want me to do? And so eventually I ended up seeing a nurse practitioner, I believe, and she just threw everything at the wall and actually took what I was saying seriously and tried all these different tests. And also one thing, if people have a short memory and don't remember, when you went to a doctor's office, like, you were heavily screened. So with mono, like, it's not like COVID is a super duper duper unique thing besides the thing with the lungs. Like, that's a huge deal. But you get a cough, you have, fatigue, all these different symptoms, which mono can also have some of those symptoms. And so I'm an honest person where I was constantly not feeling good for months. I was like, I can't go into this office. Like, what if I have COVID? Like, they make you feel like you're going to go insane. Because of COVID, like, what if I'm killing grandma? Thanks everyone for the fear mongering. But eventually my mom was like, you're in acquitted pain. You got to get there. So eventually I was able to make it there. And I did feel okay that day, where I felt honest with what I was saying. And I said, this is how I'm feeling. 'Cause you're supposed to go to the doctor, when you don't feel good. Yeah. Like, that's kind of why I'm there. So to screen people like, do you feel well? It's like, no, you fool, I don't feel well. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to get in. But eventually they threw everything at the wall, and eventually they're like, we're just going to throw mono in there just for funsies. I thought it was going to be Hashimoto's or something else. It was the mono. And then a much more severe case, we were talking about it earlier, about how this one guy was he was having issues, so he kept getting tested for COVID, and it kept coming back negative. Turned out he had sepsis.
Fun times. I'm much more concerned about sepsis than COVID.
Yes. And that's the thing too. Like, we can't treat COVID like it's the deadliest disease, because it's not. And if people just are like, oh, well, everything's COVID. No, everything's not COVID. Okay, yes, maybe there's COVID mixed in, but there are underlying health issues, or there could be another infection or another serious issue. And so when people are like, oh, underlying health issues, who cares? These are COVID deaths. It's like, no, like, if you give me a choice between like a cough from COVID or an infection from sepsis, it's probably going to be the sepsis, because the data shows that that's probably what's going to be the cause of your illness, unless, COVID is like a severe case. But it really bothers me. It's aggravating to me that we just look at COVID like it's the worst thing, because they fear-mongered it so much. And I think it's even, doctors are human beings too. Like, they're not, they're not infallible. So they're just going to have COVID on the brain. And I wish they would, like, okay, have COVID on the brain, keep it there, right? But also be like, okay, what else could this also be? If this test comes back negative, what do we do other than say, this is at least antidotal? I'm like, okay, get rest, drink water, eat well. I mean, a lot of Americans could probably benefit from that advice, but...
Oh, I think they definitely could.
But for me, like, you look at me and I'm a small woman, I'm not obese, I'm healthy, and be like, well, just sleep well, exercise. It's like, I I'm doing that. What more can I possibly do? So that's kind of my rant. But we've even heard of people who COVID was just such a big deal that people who had cancer like couldn't get their cancer treatments. We also have had situations with mental health where we've seen a decline in that area. But hey, at least you're safe from COVID.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that and I can kind of get it for the holidays because people were traveling and going all over the country, but we basically ran into a shortage on tests because so many people were getting tested. There was a massive spike, and then for work, I delve in the medical field for my position, and everybody ran out of tests basically.
And the question is like, if you say you have a cough, right? Why do you need to get tested? What are they going to do? Like, unless you are dying, like, and I mean, like, you're having a hard time breathing, like, okay, that's a huge deal. Like, get that taken care of. But if it's a mild cold, like what I had, there's no test that I need. I'm sick. Like, I just need to stay home, rest, keep an eye on my symptoms, do what I need to do, and then get on with my day.
Right. But if you were older or if you had other health issues, I think there's an argument there for you to go and get checked, because if it was COVID, and quite honestly, if it was flu or anything else, you could potentially be looking at a more serious stay in a hospital because of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. For sure.
I don't know how many times my grandpa would get sick with a cold, which would turn into a flu, which would turn into pneumonia because he wouldn't go to the hospital. We're like, dude, you got to go.
Right. And that's, again, like, that is a decision that has to be made. But when you see these lines, like I've seen these videos of these lines that are of cars.
That wraps around blocks and goes down streets and causing
craziness.
Traffic.
We are having, our health officials make policy over a much lighter variant. And I do want to say this. I understand there are people that have lost some loved ones to COVID. And I don't take that lightly. Like, I understand that. I went through something last year in 2020. I had a friend, lost sister. It was really sad. And so I have a great amount of empathy and sympathy for those situations in those cases. But I also have a great amount of empathy and sympathy for the children that are going to have issues learning, who are going to be socially isolated, who can't go to school, for the teenagers who are going to commit suicide, and for the young adults who are going to commit suicide. We've already seen the statistics of this go up, where if we isolate COVID as a variable, as the only variable that we look at, then we're ignoring all the other variables that will also lead to some kind of death.
Yep.
And so again, my heart and my sympathy is there. And in my advice, I'd be like, if you know that you could be at high risk, as much as I don't think the vaccines are true vaccines, which we can talk about, because they don't stop transmission, but I will say that they're good if you are at risk and you need a milder form. If you get the disease, it's a milder form, thank God, right? Get the vaccine. I put that in quotes, but get whatever Pfizer or Moderna has. I think that's a good idea. But I don't think the blanket policy is necessarily the best choice for people. And I think this is just common sense. I don't have any notes in front of me telling me this. It's just, there are some things you and I have talked about where it is common sense to do certain things. When in the beginning of the lockdowns, we're like, maybe we should just protect those who are vulnerable. Maybe we should think about our kids. And if they're not transmitting this disease, maybe we should let them, go back to school and see people's faces so that they can have that psychological development. Not seeing, and we can actually talk about a study that I have that just came out of New York with babies that were born during COVID, and they're having significantly decreased motor function. They're not seeing faces. They're not as socialized. They're not seeing as many people. So there's going to be those defects, and people are like, oh, we don't want to think about that. We don't want to think about it. And then by the time they want to think about it, guess what? It's going to be too late. Yeah, we're going to have a whole, you can't. And that development, people like to be like, oh, it's not a big deal. But the development of children at this stage is super important. And if we're going to keep kids in their homes because of a mild cold with the Omicron variant, I gotta be honest, I think that's a bad risk to take, because we're gonna be sacrificing more, but that's where I'm at with it.
No, that's. I don't know that I could agree. I could agree more on that. Sympathies out to everybody. I know that we lost an extended family member to COVID, which was after we had gone down and visited in Texas. They had a large family get together. I haven't been to one of these in years, since I was a toddler probably. But we went because it was like, well, a lot of these family members getting a little bit older and we don't really know what the future holds. So we went out, we visited. I wouldn't say that we were, at least those in my immediate family, we weren't particularly close to this person, but the last memories that we get to have of them is, at a family dance and dinner, basically, because they passed away just within the next couple of months because of COVID. And it's like people that, I think we talked about this on the last podcast, that the 2020 Christmas and New Year's, also 2021, we were promised, it was like, don't celebrate this year. You can celebrate next year. It's like, that is so much time for something to happen where you don't get to celebrate with that person the next year. So I think putting all of that stuff on hold without really any hard promise that you'll be able to do it again later was, I don't know, to me, it was unconscionable advice. It just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. Fauci can't keep that. Nobody can keep that promise. I don't care if it was Fauci or Trump or anybody.
So weird. The government makes all these promises that they can't keep.
They have no control over it at all.
No, it's a virus, and you have to make some of those personal decisions. Like, I had COVID over Christmas, and my sister still chose to come, and she did end up getting whatever I had. We're pretty sure it was COVID. But she said, I don't regret anything, because because all she got was, again, she got that mild cold. Like, I believe at that point it was 95% of COVID cases were Omicron. So it was pretty much, we pretty much almost knew what it was. And she's like, I don't have any regrets, because I don't know if I'll get the next Christmas. I'd rather have taken this risk than not at all, and not spend Christmas with my family because of Jordan's, sniffles. And I was at the very end of whatever I had. And then my dad ended up getting it as well, but we don't have any regrets about it. We made our choice, we took our risks, and said we want to be with our families, and screw you, Fauci. I want to be with my family. Maybe you don't have much of one anymore, Fauci, but we do, so we're going to hold on to that. And I think it's very silly, and I've heard of, and to me, it's almost unimaginable that this is happening, where people are having arguments over whether or not you can come. If you're vaccinated, you can come.
Yeah, I can't imagine that.
It's so
family.
It's so limiting. It's like, I unconditionally love you, but I would like for you to get vaccinated. So it's like, so it's conditional. Like, okay, good to know. But that's just kind of, I think. And you and I have had a couple of arguments about this, because I'm more optimistic. You're more pessimistic.
I'm much more pessimistic than you are about this.
America, like, waking up and being like, so this is getting out of hand. And I've always said, like, I think that this is going to be the point. I think people are already waking up and already realizing you're not going to have all of the population doing it, because you have people living in fear. There's actually, I know we're not going over the Federalist Papers yet, but there is a portion of the Federalist Papers I was reading. Let's see. I was reading number 8, Federalist paper, the consequences of hostilities between the states, and this one was written by Hamilton. And there's a small excerpt from it, where it says, safety from external danger is the most powerful director of national conduct. Even the ardent love of liberty will, after a time, give way to its dictates. The violent destruction of life and property incident to war, the continual effort and alarm attendant on a state of continual danger, will compel nations, the most attached to liberty, to resort... Hang on. The 2 lines. Okay. the most attached to liberty, to resort for repose and security to the institutions who have a tendency to destroy their civil and political rights. To be more safe, they at length become willing to run the risk of being less free. If this doesn't describe where we're at as a nation right now, like they're willing to give up your liberty, that's been the argument this entire time.
For safety. Yeah.
Right. And the founding fathers, it's like they were no dummies or something. They're like, yeah, we know that this could be, because a lot of the things they talk about, oh man, I can't talk about the Federalist Papers because we got to get our podcast on that. But let me just say, the founding fathers understood human nature and said, yeah, no, these are, people will give up their liberty for safety. And we can't let that happen. That's why I can't give the executive branch too much power to become a monarchy. But you hear a lot of people like, won't you just give up your freedom so that everyone will be safe. We just want you to be safe. It's all lies. It's all lies. It's all a power grab. It's what we've been saying from the beginning.
Yeah, and I really want to work on a timeline, or maybe see if somebody else has probably already constructed one, and probably be better than what I could put together. But we started this out with what was it? 3 weeks to slow the spread was the initial. It was 3 weeks. 3 weeks to slow the spread was initially where we started in the spring of 2021, 2020 actually. Gosh, it's been that long.
It's been 2 years. That's not enough to get you to be like, wait, what?
Like my head's still thinking this is just a year, and it's like, no, we've been living this for 2 years. So spring of 2020, it was 3 weeks to slow the spread, and there was the rush for the vaccines. Not just America, but everywhere else had a rush to try and create a vaccine for it. A lot of treatments early on were dismissed or thrown out, and I don't know. Some of them seem to be tossed out for political reasons. If Trump opened his mouth about something, then they would go off on it, and that was the end of it.
Because it was because it was Trump.
Yeah, but it's like, to this point, there still isn't a lot of treatment. I mean, vitamins and the monoclonal antibodies, but even some people scoff at those.
There have been some treatments that have come out, though. It's just that no one wants to acknowledge them because they just want people to get vaccinated so dang badly.
Yep, that's usually where it falls. And it was, we started 3 weeks to slow the spread, and everybody pushed through it, masking and social distancing, and then not so much masking and social distancing at some point. And then they were like, no, we're going to bring that back. And then it was 2 masks. 3 masks would be better. Infamous Fauci quote. It just makes sense. And then shortly after that, they said that if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. And so a lot of people went out and got vaccines, and this was around April, May. And then by the end of May, it was, no, this isn't working. You need to put masks back on. So everybody that went out and got that went and got vaccines, they could stop wearing masks, are now back in masks along with the unvaccinated. And then the administration starts to force, they make an announcement that the companies are going to be required for it, and companies just go along and do it before anything even gets set in motion for the law, and then the law gets hung up in the courts. It's still hung up in the courts at this point. But I think what's ended up bothering me over Christmas again is that everybody has employee shortages right now. This is true. We just went to Qdoba, and
we go to Qdoba pretty much every time I come.
But hats off to the 2 employees that were there knocking out everybody's orders. They were only able to take online orders because probably most of the staff is sick or is taking some sort of vacation right now. It's probably a mixture of the two. And you drive around and you could probably find a half dozen places at least within 5-10 minutes of your house, depending on where you live, of people that just don't have enough. Me and some of my friends went looking for some food one day, and we went to they stopped by like McDonald's, they stopped by Wendy's, they even went and stopped by Burger King. We made like 4 or 5 stops before we found somebody that actually was open on a Saturday afternoon and had employees. And you just go through all that. Well, Delta's CEO, this is just before Christmas, I believe. Delta's CEO comes out and is like, we're going to be facing some serious employee shortages, and we'd like to make the recommendation basically that you reduce the the quarantine period from 10 days to 5 days if they're not symptomatic or if they test out negative. And what happened 6 days later? CDC made some new recommendations for everybody.
I wonder if this is political or not.
Even or money. Even people that have been like, I think I was reading some CNN articles and some other like really left-leaning ones that have been super pro-vaccine are like, people are mad about the CDC's guidance and with good reason. And it's just like,
I don't see the good reason. If you're asymptomatic,
well, no, that people being mad at the CDC for just changing the guidelines to 5 very arbitrarily and within a week. It's almost
like a lot of it, I feel like, was pretty arbitrary. Like, I don't feel like much of it was incredibly science-based. Yeah, I'm not a scientist. I don't know this stuff. I just use my common sense. And I think I was listening to Ben Shapiro, and he gave some really good COVID guidance. And he's very, he was very pro-mask in the beginning when we didn't have vaccines. And I actually understand that viewpoint. I get it. That's why I wasn't like mad at people for wearing masks or anything. I was like, well, I mean, at this point, let's just do what we can and see. But now that we have vaccines and things are getting better, here was his advice. He's like, okay, if you feel sick, don't go anywhere. That's it. That was the guide. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I plan on doing. It's like, I don't feel well. I'm just not gonna go anywhere. And then if I feel good, then I'll leave.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
And that is one positive thing I can say that can come out of this, because it was fairly common before COVID that if you felt sick, but it wasn't enough to keep you in bed, you still went to work and did stuff. And of course you got other people sick. I will never forget volunteering in the children's wing at my church when I was younger, and a parent came in with their kid and was just like, oh, and like the kid didn't look 100%. Like normally kids are bouncing off the walls, excited to be there Sunday morning, play and see their friends and stuff.
See, I got much more crying children. Tons of crying children.
I had some. I just handed them off.
Don't leave me here with this half Asian woman.
Oh man. Well, these parents come in and the mother's just like, oh, she was throwing up yesterday, but it's been, it's been a little over 12 hours and she hasn't thrown up since. So she should be good. And I was just like, no.
It's like, I would like to not have this.
Like, you're not. I was like, I'm not accepting her. You can't bring her in. Like, there's no way. Like, I don't want to get sick. I don't want any of these other kids to get sick. Why'd you even bring your kid to church? Like, let them recover. My gosh, just stay home. It is not. God is not going to strike you down for staying home because your kid had a freaking stomach bug. And it's like that type of stuff is like, I would like that to stop.
Yeah, no, that's common sense. That's like, okay, if I don't feel well, I should stay home if I can, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now my sister, she tells me that she had the flu during her finals when she was in college. she had no choice. She's like, what choice do I have?
Oh yeah, because college
do.
Doesn't budge an inch on that type of stuff.
It really now they're snowflakes about it because of COVID. They're like, oh my gosh, you have sniffles, you tested positive. Stay home. Don't go anywhere.
For the rest of the semester. But we just started 3 weeks ago. Just stay home.
It's okay. Stay home. That's pretty much what happens. So college used to be cutthroat. When it comes to sickness, no, it's not. So it's just like, oh, what's happened?
Yeah, and like the vaccine argument is really gone down with this latest variant. By the way, Christmas Day, I think the CDC actually reduced their Omicron numbers. Not the COVID numbers. They did reduce those a little bit. But the Omicron numbers, they reduced them from close to 3/4 of the cases to just a little over a quarter. So it went down about 50%. They were like, yeah, sorry, we're wrong about that. So Omicron did not make up the most, at least as of Christmas Day.
Yeah. I think by this point,
maybe. I don't know.
Large enough. I think that it's definitely spreading, which I'm happy about. Listen, I'm not mad about a mild variant that's mild
still
cold.
Providing immunity for the rest of the predecessors of COVID.
And Omicron has basically destroyed the Dems case. Like, we have OSHA's emergency temporary standard, right? Mm-hmm. For COVID vaccination and testing in the workplace for any company that's over 100 employees, right? And so there is a longer mandate. I didn't read all of it because I knew what I needed to know from it. But there's also some trick language in there. And actually, Ben Shapiro actually does do a pretty good breakdown of it. And the reason why I do recommend him, I do like him, but I understand some people don't. But because he does do law, he understands it very, very well. And he breaks it down in a simpler way that you can understand without missing the details. So when it comes to law stuff, Ben is a good resource. For funnies, Crowder's not too bad. So anyway, so it's really funny. I'm bringing up that this Omicron is basically a mild cold. I will say that my mild cold, it was a pretty real cold. I'm gonna be honest. Like it was, nose was running constantly for like 2 to 3 days. I had some throat stuff. The fatigue. And actually, the interesting thing about it was that it mimicked immune flare up because I have some immune issues. So at first, I thought it was immune flare up.
Right.
And then the next day came. And I was like, crap, this isn't an immune flare up. This is more. So again, that's why I'm not the person that's like, wait, I have sniffles, I should stay home. It's like, I always have some health issues. So I can't just stop my life if it could be COVID. Like there are times where I have to power through things. And that's just what you do as an adult.
Right.
Even health issues or no. But anywho, I was reading their OSHA summary. And one of the reasons that they gave for the COVID-19 vaccination testing is that unvaccinated workers face grave danger. Grave danger. Okay? Unvaccinated workers are much more likely to contract and transmit COVID-19 in the workplace than vaccinated workers. At this point, we actually don't know if this is true because of this new variant.
Yeah, going back and forth on that, I think there were some ER doctors that came out and they were like, the majority of my patients that were in here were unvaccinated. And I was like, well, I know more than a half dozen people that got COVID over Christmas and none of them even went and saw a doctor. I was about the only one that went and got a test. So there's some people that did some at-home kits, but it's like I was about the only one that went and got a test, but that's because I was afraid it was going to be strep and I was going to be stuck with it through the entire holiday weekend before I could get a prescription. And I never had any congestion at all. Still had a sore throat, but I didn't have like any of the nasal drip or anything like that. Is that what caused your sore throat, you think? You didn't really get sore throat,
I did
you
get
did
a
get
little
it?
bit.
Okay.
But that went away pretty fast compared to like the nose situation. Like I still have a little bit of a runny nose. No one worry. Again, it's the mono. The one residual effect from the mono is that I always have a runny nose every morning without fail, and that hasn't changed since I got COVID. I ended up having just kind of that fatigue and having that runny nose and stuffy. It was runny and stuffy at the same time, which
never makes sense.
It's so bizarre. It's so weird.
Have you ever used a neti pot before?
No, when you were talking about it, you're like, yeah, I'm going to use this thing. I'm just going to do it anyway. And I was like, what the heck is that? I was like, you know what? I'm just like, I don't care. Just do what you want. I have no idea what this is.
So it's pretty much this deal where you, I think it's like a saline rinse basically. And you got to make sure the water's like boiled or filtered. You can't just use tap water because you don't know what's in it. But you pretty much it's pretty much like a saline rinse, and you have to, I guess, it's almost like holding your nose, like when you go underwater to keep the water from coming in to your nose. Well, you do the same thing, but while you're shooting it up one of your nostrils to make sure that it comes out the other one, and then you switch and go to the other side. It's not pleasant at all.
Well, I got through mine without that, so thanks. I will keep that in mind, and if I get desperate one day, I'll ask you how to do it.
Well, the funny part for me is I did it because I was like, I'm coughing, and it feels like my throat's getting tickled, but I don't have anything to cough up. There was no congestion. I could breathe through both nostrils perfectly.
So I actually did have, our coughs were different because I had a productive cough, where there was actually, I was coughing.
You were actually getting mucus up. Yeah, nope, I was not. Every now and then I'd get just a tiny bit. Normally when you're sick, it comes out and it's like green or yellow or something really gross looking. And mine was almost completely clear every time. I was like, I don't get this. I've never had a cough quite like that. I mean, I guess I've had dry coughs before, but like I had pertussis, whooping cough when I was younger. That is by far the worst thing I've ever been sick with. Coughing to the point of not being able to inhale, also feeling like I'm going to throw up or starting to throw up, and still coughing. It's just like that's how far, like each cough would just give you a bigger one later on. And this one was super mild compared to that. It still wasn't pleasant. I wouldn't recommend it.
Sure, I'm not going to go out and try to go get it.
I wouldn't say any of us were loving life while we were sick with it, but it's just
Sure.
like it didn't keep me down enough. Like I didn't stay in bed all day. I took more naps and rested up and stuff, but it's not even close to the worst thing that I was sick with.
Yeah. Nope. That makes sense. But to your point about like the people being hospitalized who are unvaccinated, that makes a lot of sense because again, I have the viewpoint that there are some people who do need to be vaccinated. That has to be their choice, but there are older people who are not vaccinated. And if you're older and you are more at risk and you're unvaccinated and you get COVID, I do think that there's a greater potential that you're going to end up in the ER. But with people who are like your friends who are younger, they can be unvaccinated and they get it and then they're fine. Like, so we have to look at the different demographics. I think both of those things are true at the same time.
Well, and just the other variables, that was probably the most frustrating thing for me was this ER doctor that comes in and is just like, most of my patients have been unvaccinated. And I was like, what is the age range for them? What is the health condition? Are they obese? Are they not? Do they have other underlying symptoms? Did they come in for COVID or did they show up with something else and they happen to have COVID? Just the fact
there's so many questions that need to be asked.
They just focus on a single variable. It's so irritating. And the variables have only increased ever since vaccines were introduced because in America we have 3 different vaccines. So the initial statistics we start out with, and this isn't even talking about race, age, gender, weight, height, any of the other variables that might be playing into this. Heck, even blood type is potentially one of the other variables that they seem to find. And it's the most simple. It was like people that had COVID and people that hadn't had it yet, and those were kind of your two groups. And then the vaccines got introduced, right? Mm-hmm. But they introduced 3 of them, and one of them's 1 shot, and 2 of them are 2 shots. So now you have unvaccinated, and then you have unvaccinated who haven't got it, and unvaccinated who have got COVID, and then you have vaccinated individuals who haven't got COVID and vaccinated individuals that do have COVID. And amongst the vaccinated, there's 3 different types. And some of them could get COVID in between shots because it takes 2 weeks before you get your second shot. And then I think it's 4 weeks after that before you hit peak immunity. And it just, all of it just keeps changing. And then it was, which variant did you get?
I just feel like sometimes health officials, all the time, I feel like they just treat us like we're stupid. It's like, do you not think that we have more of a brain capacity? There's still a difference between unvaccinated and vaccinated, also different age groups, and also underlying health conditions. Like, it's a laughable joke they came out with a study. They're like, it just shows that there's a link between, how bad you get COVID and obesity. No way. Really?
Well, since
obesity
was already its own health crisis beforehand.
Yes, again, with this vaccine mandate.
I'm going to clarify. We were talking about real obesity, not the stupid BMI charts, which are like,
yes,
if you're 5'10" and you weigh 200 pounds, but it's all muscle, you're obese. No, that one doesn't make sense. You got to actually get tested for that stuff. We're talking about legitimately obese people that end up having cholesterol, blood sugar problems. Your fat versus muscle ratio is way off. You have breathing issues, heart issues. The list goes on and on and on.
Right. And that's, a legitimate health concern. And the fact they want to turn away unvaccinated individuals because they just didn't do the right thing. Okay, fine. Do that for people who are obese too. Do that for smokers. Do that for anyone who doesn't do the right health things that they're supposed to. If you're going to make a rule for unvaccinated people, you have to make that rule across the board. And of course, it's absurd to do that. It's absurd to do that. Like, okay, we're going to help you. We're going to help you anyway. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of people who have gotten COVID who have been obese, and it has a harder effect on them. I think their body isn't as healthy. And
anything they get will have a harder effect on them.
Right.
Like, that's just across the board. I can't think of anything that you could get that being obese and unhealthy would give you an advantage over.
Right.
In fact, I'd be willing to risk a major bet on that there is nothing. It's being unhealthy is a detriment to anything that's going to try and make you more unhealthy, basically.
Yeah. And listen, if you have gotten the vaccine, good for you. Good for you. But if you want to be even more protected, look at the way that you're living your life. Look at how much sleep you're getting. Look at what kind of nutrients you're putting into your body. Ask yourself, are you priming yourself to be healthy? And if you're not, you should. I think everyone should. This is something that we should be focused on in America, and no one wants to talk about it. The health officials don't want to talk about it because the government wants you to be fat, and they want you to be dependent on them.
I think you could even push the idea, and this is where it gets in a little bit of a conspiratorial realm, but hospitals and health systems and all that, they're not benefiting if you get healthy and in shape and take care of yourself. They're benefiting if you keep eating McDonald's 6-7 times a week, and you're eating Cheetos and Twinkies and Krispy Kremes, and you just consume sugar and unhealthy foods. You just consume sugar and carbs and saturated fats and all the other different things that they have out there that are not good for you. Well, this was, I can't remember who told me this initially. It was like, okay, people are complaining because you want to shop at Whole Foods or something like that, and you want to get good, healthy, organic food. And everybody's like, it's expensive. It's like, well, you want to play the short or the long-term game? Right now, you can play the short-term game. You can get the just the super processed milk that costs you like $3-4 a gallon, or you can get the organic milk that costs you around $8 a gallon. I know it's twice as expensive, but you know it's even more expensive in the future? Your medical bills.
And you don't even have to make that huge of a switch. Like, you can still go, like, I don't go to a Whole Foods. I
just use them as an example.
Exactly. But if you want to go like in the middle and be like, I just want to have like fruits and vegetables with my meats, chicken, most young people know this, chicken's fairly inexpensive. Like, it's kind of the thing. If you want a protein, that's what you get. There's so much you can do with chicken. There's so much you can do with really nourishing foods where you need less of those empty carbs, and you can actually maybe eat less but still be more full because of the type of food that you're taking in. And that goes into another conversation about health, which I am not necessarily experienced on, but I've done a little bit on it just because of my own health issues. But all that to say, just be healthy. You have to want it. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I've always, I don't know, like, if we've kind of like touched on it a little bit, but I always think about like growing up and like having my own kids, and I want to be like, my body's going to go through a lot because I'll have to give birth.
Right. That's even a better argument for it. You want to be ready to go through that. The women that I've seen that usually recover the best, growing up, because it was just like so many people were getting pregnant and having kids. Yeah. And with the age range of my family, it was like it was like my mom was pregnant most of the time, and there was usually somebody in the church that was going to be pregnant with a kid that would be one of their age. And the ones that recovered the fastest were the ones that took care of themselves really, really well. One lady I'll never forget.
Bounce back way faster just because your body's in better shape to repair itself. And of course, giving birth is a lot of trauma on a woman's body. So, rest and give it what it needs. Don't rush into anything. But I already decided like a couple of years ago, I was like, I want to give my body the best chance at not just being healthy so I can bounce back and look good in a bikini, but it's really just about being healthy and be like, I want to be there as much as I can for my kids, for my husband. And you want to be healthy too, to help take care of Preston, help take care of your children, be active with them. These are long-term goals and then teach your kids to want to be healthy too. And get them away from the dang iPad. But this is a whole connection with, I think there's nothing wrong with wanting comfort. Like, I think comfort comes with the empty carbs. Like, we all love a good bag of Cheetos. We all love a good thing of candy. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting those comfort foods, but it's the overindulgence in comfort that ultimately could lead to our death. And I feel like that's sometimes what happens with COVID is like, we so desperately want to be comfortable and safe that we neglect all else. And before we know it, we might actually just be dying in different ways. And we don't even realize it. And that's kind of what I'm hoping Americans will wake up to and be like, okay, the government is not going to take care of us. No, duh, they're not going to take care of you. The founding fathers set up so that we could, give us the independence to take care of ourselves. And be like, oh crap, they broke all their promises, and they were making promises they couldn't keep in the first place. And so the question is, like, they have to take it into their own hands and be like, am I going to keep listening to this, or am I going to listen to common sense? You don't even have to be religious to just use, use your brain. There's plenty of non-religious people, doctors that have gotten suspended off of Twitter for talking about vaccinations, who have way more intelligence on this subject than we do, who use common sense, use their intellect to be like, hey, something's off here. And maybe we can talk about those doctors that have gotten taken off of Twitter, so that you can, the only reason why you're following the science is because you kill off all the other ideas of what COVID could be.
Yeah, it's like at this point the arguments that they've fallen from for the vaccine was initially that it would stop. You wouldn't be able to transmit it if you had the vaccine. Well, that's turned out to be completely false. It's not stopping it. Like other vaccines, from what I was looking up, MMR, the Tdap vaccine, I mean, even the smallpox vaccine, like all of those, what they did is they stopped the transmission of it. And that's why they either don't exist today or virtually don't exist, is because it stops the transmission. The only time that you ended up with lessened side effects was if you got the vaccine while you were already infected with something. If you got the MMR while you had like measles or mumps or rubella for that matter, if you had any of those already and then you got the vaccine, there was a chance that it would probably just lessen the symptoms for you. So given those are like the regular ones that we see as a vaccine, and now we have this one in which they seem to be just changing the definitions of stuff all the time. You even mentioned one earlier, but it's like the vaccines were preventing people from getting sick or they were preventing it from spreading. And I would accept either one, but now it's like, maybe you won't go to the hospital is basically what they've come down to. And that is 2-3 shots in. People are still getting sick. People are still going to the hospital. And more than anything, it's still transmitting. And it's still changing. And I mentioned the bingo, the 2022 bingo board. And it's like one of the squares on it was a new COVID strain. And like 3-4 days in, and France has a new COVID strain. I was like, oh, I'm going to mark that one off. Here we go. And I think it does just people. This is likely to be endemic at this point. It's going to be ongoing.
Right, and I think...
But we can't keep going like this.
No, we can't. But there are still going to be people that are going to try to control from the top. And man, I hope it's not too late for people to realize it, where I'm like, listen, if people want to join this cause, say, hey, I want to have freedom after being, to a certain extent, I think there has been a level of brainwash for sure. And be like, hey, it's okay for your past mistakes. You're here now. Like, I'll bind with anyone that wants to be like, yeah, I'm done with this. I did everything they asked and it still wasn't enough. And I still got COVID. It's like, okay, well, let's just take our freedom back and take back our choice to choose, what goes in our body, and actually use some common sense about whether or not to get this quote unquote vaccine. Again, I think it lessens symptoms, which I can accept that, but let's not pretend like this thing stops transmission and that every single person in America needs it, when maybe we could actually give it to countries that aren't as vaccinated, where they might have some older populations. That is
another money trail problem, that third world countries have not received very much of these vaccinations, which they are supposed to be getting. While they're not getting them, we're getting booster shots, 3rd and 4th rounds of shots. I say 3rd and 4th, clarify, 1st, 2nd shot for Moderna, Pfizer. And then there's been one wave of booster, and I know people that have gotten a 2nd booster. So it's like, you've had 4 shots at this point.
It hasn't even been a year since the vaccine came out.
What was it that Fauci changed it to, you were saying earlier?
It wasn't, you should not have the term be fully vaccinated, but up to date on shots.
There you go.
So it basically means, listen, if you're going to keep going with this COVID vaccine thing, that's fine. You're just going to be getting boosters for the rest of your life. I am not kidding. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, if you are going for your 4th, they're probably going to have a 4th booster by March. So that's 4 shots in 1 year. That's 4 shots in 1 year. Plus, we have this mandate for a vaccine that doesn't even stop transmission. and quote unquote unvaccinated workers are facing grave danger, apparently. Thanks, OSHA. Glad to know I'm in grave danger. So it's never going to end. We all should know it's not going to end. And I truly can't understand the mindset of just do what they say. If we just do what they say, we're gonna be free. It's like, no, I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I'm not.
A lot of you guys have been doing what they say since, day one. And how free are you feeling compared to before?
Yeah, I said this about 2 weeks in. I was like, this is never going to end. And I got backlash for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember saying, to someone, I was like, hey, remember I said, there's no end to this. And the implication was I was right, because it wasn't hard to see.
Yep.
It wasn't hard to see, because if you look at history, tyrants just don't give back freedom once you give it to them.
No, they don't. Well, even if they weren't tyrants before, they've had those studies before. It was like, all right, we're going to give some of these students or these participants, all the power. They're running everything. And it doesn't take very long before they're abusing it on everybody.
It's almost like, again, it's human nature. The founding fathers understood this. As I am now reading in the Federalist Papers, they completely understood this, is why they made the system the way that it is. They did the best they could with it. Maybe you don't like all of it, but you got to give them some props for putting together an entire government system. Like, that's pretty dope if you think about it. There's an entire book on on why they did it. So that's pretty, that's pretty incredible. But people don't just give back power. And that's the thing about leftists I find interesting, or even liberals. There's that COVID.
Yep.
And even with people who are very empathetic and compassionate, which I appreciate that quality in them, but they almost assume the best of people. And see, some would call me a pessimist. I just think that I believe in the depravity of man. And I just understand that when you have compassionate and empathetic people, like, I just assume that they have the best intentions. I don't always assume that.
No.
I don't. There's some people I do. There's some people I don't. And if you assume that everyone has good intentions, you miss the nature of man that, again, abuses that power. They're not just going to give it back. And so when you have a whole population of people that are like, love, compassion, empathy, I'm all for those things, and for love, compassion, and empathy with the correct terms. I don't think that they're using the correct terms for those words. That's just my opinion.
No, maybe they are, but if they are, I think they're delusional about it.
Yes,
I think that's one
perhaps.
that is one of the defining traits, is that when you do tend to be more on the left, you do tend to have more empathy and sympathy than those who are on the right. And that doesn't seem to be something you choose politically. It's more like that's how you are, so you align with either the right or left more. At least from when Dr. Jordan Peterson's talked about it, and he breaks down how people's temperaments and personalities are more of a dictator for whether you end up conservative or liberal. But I think we talked about this a little bit before when it came to what type of government that people want running, and why socialism is so prevalent amongst the left. And I think that it is so prevalent because they inherently believe that people are naturally good. And I don't believe that, therefore a socialism type of society wouldn't work.
Yeah. Because I believe that people on the ground, people like you and me, like that are there it is. More empathetic and young, like millennial like us, I do think that they do have good intentions. People in government,
no.
They know, I feel like they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing, and they have a taste of power, and they want it. And they are using those people that have empathy and compassion for their own gain. Because the ones in government, they're not going to suffer for it. It's going to be the people on the ground that are going to suffer for it.
Right.
And that's why I try to warn people, because I'm like, I understand that you care, and I care too. Don't get me wrong, I care. I just know that this method isn't actually going to work. And we can, I guess, debate it back and forth, and I'm always up to talk about concepts with people that don't agree. I think that's actually the most fun. But I always enjoy when you and I get into some stuff that we don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah, it pushes us. It pushes the bounds of our thinking and helps us to see things from a different perspective.
It does. And I think a lot of people, even conservatives and liberals, leftists, independents alike, we all live in a bubble of people that agree with us. And that's all good to a certain extent, but you got to talk to people that don't have the same views or even variations
Mm-hmm.
of the same view.
Yeah, because you need to make sure of what your stance is and where you're at. And if you don't get those outside perspectives, you don't see it from somebody else's point of view where they've walked, miles in a different set of shoes than you have, and they've experienced things different than you, then you just have a very finite and niche perspective on a much broader picture than you're aware of. And the same is for them too, because they need to be able to listen to where you're coming from and your experiences and how you see things. Those are the most fun conversations if they can stay civil, which is what we started this all on, is that you and me knew that we didn't agree on everything. We would run into disagreements, but we would still be friends afterwards, and we very unlikely to get heated and then hate each other afterwards.
No.
I'm not going to say it's impossible.
No, like honestly, that's the fun though, is that you can have an intense conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I think I was watching a C.S. Lewis documentary that kind of goes through his life and how he and his roommates or like his colleagues in his younger days would, it seemed like they had really intense conversations about God where it did get intense and not necessarily heated, but they all still cared about each other, but they just understood that the topic itself was of great importance, and so they kind of gave it the intensity, dare I say, that it deserved. And so there's no doubt that you and I will get intense about certain things, but by no means does that mean that we hate each other. And I just wish that people could do the same. I wish that we could still have, like, I miss the idea of like a thinking club, of like just having a night like once a month where you get some people around a table with some tea or coffee and sit down and talk about different ideas with people that have different thoughts on it. And just having like that, to me, just seems like so fun, like with the understanding of being civil and just wanting to think together and learn and maybe even get your own point of view proven wrong on the spot. It shows something about a person when they can be like, oh wow, I think I might be wrong about that. Let me think on it.
Right.
And really evaluate what you're saying and maybe come to the conclusion that they were wrong. Like, that takes a lot of humility. That's actually a learning spirit. I feel like there's been some points where I've been moved a little bit, where I've been like, okay, let me think about this. Maybe I am just looking at it because from my own perspective, like I'm a middle class, suburb girl. Maybe I should rethink somehow I feel about different race issues. Or like, okay, let me just think on this. Like, let me have a moment to just take all this in. And so other people's perspectives can help. That doesn't mean that you 100% change yours, but it gives it more body, your perspective more body if it needs it.
Mm-hmm.
I just want people to be civil because I like having fun conversations where, where people disagree. It can be a lot of fun, but it's not fun anymore. It just seems like dreadful.
It became really tribal thanks to the internet. I think that really messed with a lot of things, especially when the zingers and the gotcha videos and the so and so destroys leftists or Trump supporter, like all these different videos come out, and when you have that type of stigma going around because you basically want to be right and you want to be so right that you can just destroy the competition and just utterly defeat them, people do not like to admit that they're wrong because they lose that spotlight.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's our pride too. I mean, again, another human nature situation. We all want to look good. We all want to have that pride. And then when someone comes in and is like, oh, maybe that might not be it. Let me show you X, Y, and Z. You have two choices. You can get super defensive, and most people double down on their bad point of view, and it ends up making them look really foolish and really silly because when someone points out the fact, you're like, ugh, and you're like, wait, no, I wasn't ready.
I don't know that they would look foolish when they double down.
If they're wrong.
If they can admit, well, I mean, I guess it depends on how you see doubling down versus admitting you're wrong.
So
goes.
those are two different. Those are two different things. Like doubling down on your viewpoint when it's say if I say, Connor, I think that 30% of dogs are white. Okay, and you're like, Jordan, actually, this incredibly in-depth study says that they're 80% white. And I'm so I'm like, no, they're 30%. Here's why, because I see a lot of white dogs. Actually, excuse me, I'd see it the other way. I don't see as many white dogs. I see a lot more black and brown dogs. And from my experience, no, there's only 30%. And I think that your data is skewed and that you're only doing it from a spot, blah, blah, blah. And I go into all this stuff when you're like, no, Jordan, 80% of them are white. It's kind of that kind of situation where it's fact after fact kind of proves that viewpoint is incorrect. It's getting really obvious, but you keep doubling down because you don't want to turn back and say that you were wrong.
Okay. I've always seen doubling down as just being like, you kind of just admit defeat, but it's not, it didn't ever have the type of humility if it was, we'll say first, second interaction. Like you mentioned with a friend where you guys, I think your friend had said something about a statistic and or about one of the vaccines, and then you checked it with him and were like, I guess it's not, and it's just like, okay, I guess I was wrong. As I don't see that so much as doubling down. That one's more humility.
That's not
doubling down would be like keep going, but then there's people that don't ever admit they're wrong, even if they are presented with all these different things,
and there kind of
and they just keep hold to it.
And there is a point too where Proverbs does say, and you have to discern when someone's a fool and when they're not. It's like, if this person just refuses to listen and doesn't want to hear any kind of truth or any kind of wisdom, there is a point where you kind of walk away and you say, okay, I'm not going to argue with you about this anymore. I'm going to talk to someone else, because you've already done all you can. And not even not talking about vaccines either. You can,
just anything.
Right. But just with biblical truth or the Bible, if you're a Christian, well, the Bible clearly says one thing, but they refuse to do that thing, or they're living in sin, and you present them with all the reasons that they ought not to, and they still choose to. You're still in their life, and you still pray for them, and you still check in on them, but to a certain extent, you kind of have to let go. But again, discernment for each situation that you're in.
Yeah, what is it? I want to make sure I have this right. Yeah, Matthew 7 verse 6, do not give that which is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, and they will trample them under their feet, and turn and tear you to pieces. And I guess it could be getting used out of context because I need to read around the rest of this verse. But I mean, that's been a fairly common saying, not to throw your pearls to swine, because they will just eat it and they get wasted, something that's valuable. And that's, I guess in this instance, this is...
Wisdom is described as treasure, worth more than, silver and gold. It is precious and valuable. And if someone doesn't want it, it's be there for them, care about them.
You're wasting, but if you keep at it, you're wasting your time, energy, resources, when there could be somebody else that's more accepting to learn and even still disagree with you. But I would consider that time more valuable than just arguing with somebody that is just dead set, not going to agree with you, or even agree to part of what you're saying, or even listen to it, simply because you're a man, or you're a woman, or you're a Republican, or a Democrat. You voted for Trump. You didn't vote for Trump. You're vaccinated. You're not vaccinated. It's like all these different things where it's like everything's become just supremely tribal, where if you are this, then I don't listen to you. You are an awful human being in all areas of life. You couldn't possibly be good. It's kind of that is... I want to say that's the way the media narrates it, but no, that is my experience on social media.
Yeah, and that can happen
interacting with people.
That can happen with conservatives as well, and basically.
It's not limited to any one group.
Everybody. For sure. Because I consider myself conservative. I think you consider yourself conservative. Mm-hmm. But I try not to fall into tribalism. I try. Maybe someone's like, Jordan, that's not true. I see you. I'm like, okay, well, you can let me know. You just sit down with me. Let me know what I'm doing, and I'll evaluate what you have to say. But I'm pretty open and honest when I really feel like I don't like what these conservatives have done, or I don't think that this was the godly move. I was like, I think that this is actually a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind saying that, where I'm like, yeah, this is not good, but I tend to lean towards conservatives, just because they line up with my viewpoints, but that doesn't mean that I believe everything that they say, because there's actually quite a bit of varying viewpoints, like among conservatives as
Mm-hmm.
well, like even with Afghanistan, about whether or not we should have withdrawn. Let's put aside what Biden did. Like, there has been a great discussion on whether or not we should have stayed in Afghanistan.
Right.
Obviously withdrawing would have been a key
Would have
point
been
to that.
optimal.
But conservatives disagree on that,
Mm-hmm.
and there's good different reasons for it, and then you can talk that through. So again, tribalism, I don't know. It's not, I feel like leftists can tend to go for it a little bit more. I do feel like there's some more brainwashing, and I want to make it very clear, leftists and liberals, not the same thing.
No.
So I'm talking about leftists, because they get very culty, sometimes very culty.
Yes.
Again, that is leftists, not liberals.
Mm-hmm.
They can be kind of a lot. But anyway, let's kind of move in to, before we move into some of the fun stuff that Connor has talked a little bit about. I want to talk a little bit about our children. I think that this is actually a topic that needs to be discussed more. I think Virginia put a good light on it. There was a study done on 255 babies born at New York Presbyterian's Morgan Stanley's Children's Hospital and Allen Hospital between March and December of 2020. And they ended up publishing this journal. And the doctor, I don't know really how to say her last name. I think it's Dumitru. There we go. I got it. But she says that infants born to mothers who have viral infections during pregnancy have a higher risk of neurodevelopment deficits. So we thought we would find some changes in the neurodevelopment of babies whose mothers had COVID during pregnancy. She is Dr. Danny Dumitru is an assistant professor of pediatrics and psychiatry at Columbia University. And there's it's just such a long title. I'm not going to go through all that. We were surprised to find absolutely no signal suggesting that exposure to COVID while in utero was linked to neurodevelopmental deficits. Rather, being in the womb of a mother experiencing the pandemic was associated with slightly lower scores in areas such as motor and social skills, though not in others, such as communication or problem-solving skills. The results suggest that the huge amount of stress felt by pregnant mothers during these unprecedented times may have played a role. So again, from infants, we are seeing a little bit of kind of a decline with those skills. And what they do recommend, which is the best, I'm not going to read the whole study. I'm trying to, wait, where did it go? It was in here. Okay, well, basically what the study they're recommending is, like, make sure you have playtime with them with no mask on. It's like, really? I didn't know that.
Like how we've done for centuries.
Yes. But the whole study, it's on Columbia University Irving Medical Center, so you can go take a look at it there. But just thinking about our kids again, and of course we have Chicago schools. I believe those are closing down because of the unions. So that's a lot of fun stuff. There. Keep an eye out for our kids, because they're the ones that suffer the most for our stupid decisions.
Mm-hmm.
There is no doubt in my mind at this point that the most vulnerable group we have in America are these children, who are going to be suffering quite a bit from this, and we have no idea what the damage could be as they get older, and that scares me.
No measurement for that.
Yeah. So bring us home with some fun stuff, Connor. What fun things have happened in the internet?
I have a few, actually. There's a little back and forth for the Australian Open regarding vaccine mandates, and this will just be our transition to irony. But the number one tennis player, Novak Djokovic, was granted a vaccine exemption after he had documents that proved that he had already been sick and gotten over it in, I think, early December, Well, they granted him the exemption, and then he gets to Australia, and then they were like, "You're not vaccinated, so off to detention camp you go."
What?
Yeah, there we go. This is actually from CNN. Novak Djokovic was granted vaccine exemption after testing positive for COVID-19 in December, court documents show. And as we run into this, Melbourne, Australia, CNN division, Novak Djokovic was granted a medical exemption to compete in the Australian Open as he had recently recovered from COVID-19, documents published on Saturday by Australia's Federal Circuit Court show. The development comes as the tennis player, who's number 1 in the world, is confined to a temporary detention facility in Melbourne as he mounts a desperate legal challenge against the cancellation of his visa ahead of the tournament. Mr. Djokovic has received, on the 30th of December 2021, a letter from the Chief Medical Officer of Tennis Australia recording that he had been provided with the medical exemption from COVID vaccination on the grounds that he had recently recovered from COVID, the document said. Djokovic's first COVID-positive PCR test was recorded in December 16th, on December 16th, 2021, and after not showing signs of a fever or respiratory symptoms, he later applied for a medical exemption to compete in the Australian Open, according to the court filing. So basically, he gets initially the Australian Open had said, if you're not vaccinated, you can't play. It doesn't matter if you're Mr. Djokovic or if you're one of the lower ranked tennis players, you're not playing. And then they've been saying no exemption. Then he gets an exemption, and then he gets there, and then they're like, yeah, it doesn't fly. You need to get vaccinated. And of course he says no. He's not the only tennis player that ended up in this detention facility, by the way. These buildings are basically ones that were built to house. Initially, it was meant to, if I'm correct, it was only meant for travelers from abroad. If they
It always starts off small,
if they needed to
doesn't
quarantine. Yeah, well, now they're out arresting citizens at this point. That is Australia. And they're not the only country doing that, by the way. So condolences to our brothers and sisters in Australia. Our prayers are with you. The protests have been awesome to watch. The confrontations between anybody that is tired of the government just... Sorry. Anybody anybody from the government that is just straight out oppressing me. You have police making random door knocks to come and check on your vaccination status. I watched a video the other day of them showing up at somebody's house because he posted something saying the government wasn't their friend and that people should basically be wary of it. The cops showed up without a warrant, asking if he posted this social media, and he was just like, what? Yeah. What are you doing here? Under what grounds are you here to accuse? And he pretty much chased them off with arguments. They just ended up leaving as soon as he had the slightest bit of defense against them.
Yeah, he's right, though. For wherever you are, government's not your friend.
Yeah, so that's what's happening outside of America. Brief look into Australia. You guys can look into it yourself.
What about here?
Here, we're not quite at police door knocking yet, but...
Well, just a fun story from here.
Fun story from here? Well, you have a couple. So there's some good programs coming along that are suggesting 4-day work weeks are actually a good idea, and that people seem to be more invigorated for work when they have a 3-day weekend and they can actually rest, get things done, and enjoy their life instead of working 40 hours a week. By the way, you keep the same type of pay. So there's a couple companies that are keeping it permanently, and there's some other ones that are experimenting with it. I wish that I had the name of the group that's helping run the tests. Let me see. I'll see if I can find it later. There is an organization, 4-Day Week Global. They're the ones that are running tests for 4-day work weeks around the world. So if you guys are interested in that and you want to propose it to your boss, your company, it seems to be interesting. I don't know that they're extending. Like, I've heard of extensions before, where instead of doing 5 days of 8 hours, you would do 4 days of 10 hours. So you still get your 40 hours in, but then you get a 3-day weekend. Doesn't sound awful to me, but I thought that was interesting. Next up, we have Trump to launch his social media platform on President's Day. Truth Social. I think it's like one of the... It's just a lame name. I don't like it at all.
I'm sure someone tried to tell him and he's like, no.
He's just going to go with it.
This is it. They're like, All right. Okay,
I mean,
man.
I'll go look at it and see what's up. But I mean, I have not really even been. I ventured out and checked out a couple other platforms, and I don't care at this point in time. Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. So President's Day, everybody be looking out for his social media. We'll see how it does competing. I'm really interested to see how the launch goes and how many users they get off the bat.
Yeah.
Because recently, after a Joe Rogan podcast, there was a bunch of people, like I think around 500,000. It might have been more than that actually. Left Twitter, and I think it was Gab that they went to. It might be a different one. It's another microblogging site. But there was a big exodus because of some of Joe Rogan's guests who had been banned off of Twitter for basically being outspoken against COVID stuff. Waiting for a little bit more of that to develop and see if they're permanent bans or if they're temporary bans, because sometimes people get slaps on the wrist and sometimes they're just gone. But I think the final, just the irony,
The icing on the cake.
and I'm gonna put this up on the TV here. Jordan,
We're in a new spot today, by the way. So we have
we had to
couches.
rearrange. We're not the only ones working today. Jordan, do you care to read the title of this article?
Sure. It says Penn's transgender swimmer lost to Yale's transgender swimmer in a hotly contested women's Ivy League 100-meter race.
Oh, that's the worst part, is not being able to laugh. Yeah, that came across my screen.
Where can they find this?
This article is from Outkick, but I imagine there's gonna be quite a few on this one.
Oh my gosh.
Or none. It could go either way, actually.
This is sweet. This is sweet revenge. I gotta admit, this feels right.
Revenge or irony?
It just feels
I don't
right.
know.
Like, it just feels like they deserve this kick in the face, where they wanted to compete against women so that they can win.
And I bet you their records are way above everybody else's.
Oh yeah. But then they end up just competing against another man anyway. I'm crying. It's too much. It's too good.
Penn transgender swimmer Leah Thomas, who had been crushing her competition since joining the women's swim team after 3 years swimming as a biological male, met her match Saturday in the 100-meter freestyle during a tri-meet with Yale and Dartmouth. Thomas won the 200-meter and 500-meter races at Penn's final home meet of the season, but she finished 6th in the 100-meter, where Yale's, I guess that's Isaac, I've never seen it spelled that way, Isaac Hennig, a transgender swimmer who is in the process of transitioning from female to male, not even done, in the process, crushed Thomas. Hennig finished the 100 100-meter race in 49.57 seconds, while Thomas touched the wall at 52.84.
Wait a minute. So hang on, go back up. So this
still lost to 6 other girls, actually.
But this second one, this other transgender swimmer is female to male.
That is weird.
Okay, that's even better. That's almost
okay. That I didn't even catch that when I read through it. No,
yeah.
You're right.
Female to male.
Just be a male to female.
A female still beat this guy. Okay, so either way, it's hilarious. Wow.
Well, and in the 100, he only placed what? I think it said that he finished 6th. Yeah, Thomas finished 6th.
And so there's other women that also beat him.
Yep.
Yeah.
But somehow he won the... Okay, I mean... No, that doesn't make sense to me. He won the 200 and the 500. And then lost the 100. So I guess better stamina and not as much... I don't even know what you would call that in the beginning.
Like a burst,
yeah.
Like because you know that you're going a shorter distance, so you're gonna give it a bit more power. Wow, what a fun time!
Wait a minute, I wasn't prepared for that. Everything is messed up. I can't wrap my head around this. The NCAA needs to do something about this. They need to put science into the decision and discussion. A Penn swimmer parent told the Daily Mail.
They're not wrong about that.
In the 400 freestyle relay, Thomas was beaten yet again by Hennig, who swam his leg in 50.45 to Thomas's 51.94. In the pictures, so that must be the male to female.
Yeah.
That is the female to male. So already looking a lot more masculine due to the, I'm going to guess the transition.
Yeah, because you can tell, like, just
hormones.
the way that the shoulders are, that she's definitely been taking a lot of testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
So she is going to have an up on her female competitors as well. Like, it's messed up both ways.
Yeah,
it's
it looks
super
like
messed up.
spectators. I'm just going to read through some more of this because this is just too intriguing. I want to find out what other details are in this. Spectators in attendance told the Daily Mail that Hennig, who had his breasts removed, won the 50-yard freestyle and proceeded to pull down the top of his swimsuit.
What? Oh my
In
gosh.
June,
Okay.
Hennig wrote in a New York Times column that he wasn't taking hormones and would remain on the women's team. What? This is just getting too confusing at this point.
Weird.
I think Hennig is the female to male transition.
Yes.
Who's staying on the women's team,
but also claims that she's not taking hormones,
but had her breasts removed.
But I'm just go back up to the picture.
So she removed the drag in the water, basically.
Let me see what Isaac. How do you spell the name? Isaac.
It was ISASZAC or something like that. There, everybody can understand why I paused at that name.
Wait, no.
ISZAC.
Okay.
Hennig. HENIG.
I need to see a better picture of her.
All right. Yeah, because they didn't label them in the pictures. They just brought them up. Search.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this, unfortunately, shirtless picture of her. She definitely looks pretty built. I'm not.
So she's not taking hormones.
Here's the thing. We don't know if that's the truth. I'm not sure if I'm buying it.
Yeah, you guys will have to look up the photos for yourself.
Yeah, like I'm looking, like we can see her without her. She's posing in a Speedo, but her upper body is, well, I mean, female swimmers do have a pretty legit upper body and tend to have
anybody
a bit more of a
that does like female swimmers, gymnasts, hockey players, soccer players, they all have fairly defined figures and muscle. Especially swimmers, because that is just them and gymnasts for sure.
Oh yeah.
But swimmers, they have incredible bodies and tons of muscle. Very dense from what I've seen. But this just I don't understand.
Yeah.
All right, some of the comments way too complicated for me. I can't keep up with this. I agree. All right, I'm gonna have to do like a little bit. I did not realize that this
There's only
article
7
was
comments there though.
No, it's just the breakdown of it. Like I need to have like their pictures. Their like, is she transitioning? Is she not transitioning? I don't understand. I mean, she did go and have genitalia removed.
You mean breasts?
Yeah, breasts.
Okay. Yeah, this is weird. This is super weird.
Yeah, no, most of the comments are saying they're confused and asking if they're reading this right or if it's a typo. So I'm gonna have to look into these.
Yeah, we'll give you guys an update.
Two people a little bit more, strange. And we will. First thing on the next News Corner segment, I will run down this particular race and break it down for you guys, because I'm gonna have to go check some other articles and find out if that's legit or not. I mean, from the rest of the article, it sounds like it's right. But she doesn't consider herself trans. She's not taking hormone treatment. She had her breasts removed. She's staying on the women's team, but
because she probably couldn't make it on the men's team. That's my thought. Like, I don't think she can make it.
Well, I mean, I would guess that that Penn State's transgender swimmer wasn't able to cut it on the men's team. I mean, he raced with them for a few years, but maybe he wasn't. I'd have to go look at his record and see where was he placing. I'm going to guess not near the top because he just got bested by quite a few females, actually. And normally those race times are fairly different. That's why the men's and women's sports are separate.
Yeah. Well, that's confusing, hilarious, also sad, also what has happened to society. I have a lot of questions. But
more to come.
Yes, I will let you do more research.
I think the real question at the end of the day, Jordan, is will resident skeptics be on Trump's Truth Central?
Let's see how it goes. Maybe we'll see.
We could be on Truth Social. We could be one of the first ones.
You know what, Connor? We can take a vote. Whoever has the most votes wins. Oh wait, there's only 2 of us. So.
I'll just put a vote on this podcast and we'll see what people say.
Okay, I can make an Instagram poll and see if we should go on Truth
Put it on Instagram. I'll put it on Spotify. We'll rack up all the votes and see what we get.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Other than that, we will catch you guys next time for another book club episode.
Club. Ooh, book club.
I might have just stolen it off of somebody else's podcast.
I mean, book club is not necessarily like the most unique name on the planet.
No, it's not. Book club, book review.
I don't like book review.
Coffee table book.
That's weird. Book club. We'll just go do book club. Book club.
How good is the book? Does it land on the coffee table where everybody can see it, or in the bathroom where people are forced to look at it?
It's just decoration. It's a decoration book.
I never got that.
That's what I have in our bathroom.
I know. You're one of them.
Yeah, because I need something to put in the shelves.
I sit down and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. I don't have time to read this. Why is it in here?
Do have the Federalist Papers in the bathroom, but then Eden stole them, so they're gone. So I guess it's like a bathroom library situation. So
I'm gonna
take a pee, but
I'm gonna bring a random
book
and leave it in your bathroom someday, just to start swapping
Absolutely, it's
things
a sharing library.
See if you notice.
All right, this has been good. We're excited to drop our first episode of Federalist Papers, and also the website is just this close to completion, where you will see our beautiful faces and also a pretty good bio for both of us, and also links to everything you need. Also sources.
Yep.
Big deal. We want to make sure we
more
have
homework
sources.
for us, getting all those sources up.
Oh my gosh.
I can't wait because I got to go through the entire repository that we have.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that off air. But as I guess stay safe, but like mostly from car crashes. Be careful with the car crashes.
And smoking. Don't smoke.
Don't smoke. And don't drink and drive either. Those are very dangerous, so don't do those.
Also very inconvenient. Please don't inconvenience me by drinking and driving, whether it's traffic or I'm the one in the wreck with you. Yeah. It's not appreciated.
Also, don't drive high.
Yeah, you're just too slow on the road. You and the 80-year-old are having a race, and it's like 30 miles an hour below what you should be driving. You're going to get rear-ended. Please don't.
All right, those are our safety tips for tonight. Today? Who knows when we're filming this? Or recording, actually. So I think
we're not filming anything.
Yeah.
Maybe someday.
Maybe one day. All right.